Good morning, everyone. We are starting this second International Congress, second day of the International Congress. When we talked to the organizers last year about the different topics, one of the things that were really discussed was the analysis of MERCOSUR in Brazil, more specifically, not only as a main partner, but also as the situation and the conditions our area is in terms of integration. And, well, Brazil is our main referent. We're really thrilled to have you here today, and would like to know what's happening in the region. Let's say that MERCOSUR is our strategic turning points. It's undergone different economic and trade integration. And then there was a certain process of disintegration, and over the last years, it has started to recover the integration that it used to enjoy years before. And I think that with Bolsonaro's presidency, I think that these bursts of energy will really pay off. And Argentina is really committed to this integration as well. So let's begin. We have Gustavo Segré, an international analyst that knows the situation, the Brazil and the MERCOSUR situation very well. Gustavo, can you please share your analysis of the current situation of this integration process from the political and economic standpoint? Good morning, everyone. Congratulations for this Congress. And Brazil, Argentina, MERCOSUR in general has had several situations. At some point, it was good. Argentina was all right. Brazil wasn't. And sometimes both of them were okay. Sometimes both of them were wrong. And when you talk about strictly Brazil and Argentina, we usually think Brazil had last year an inflation rate of 3.73% versus 47.6% in Argentina, an reference interest rate of 6.5% that is probably being reduced by the lack of economic activity versus 70% in Argentina. So it's hard to imagine a macroeconomic convergence in those situations. Apart from that, if we think about the ideology of the government, of the administrations that we currently have, I think it's a great opportunity because both administrations agree that the right path is to cut public expenditure, to have a fiscal superavet. We have to open MERCOSUR to the world. And when you verify, we find that it's very little what the MERCOSUR has advanced, considering that it has formal agreements with Egypt, Israel, India, Africa, and Palestine. So if we take that as a world perspective, it's very little what MERCOSUR can do, as at least much more than this. We cannot say that MERCOSUR is a bad thing. It has room for improvement. So that's my first outlook. Mr. Minister Avalle, how do you see this integration, not only from the wheat industry because of the expectations that we have, but also considering Brazil as a great market? Córdoba has always been a pro-MERCOSUR province. We've worked on it strongly. I believe that Córdoba must be one of the provinces that has been mostly affected by MERCOSUR. If MERCOSUR goes well, then Córdoba is highly enhanced. If MERCOSUR has difficulties, one of the members of the MERCOSUR faces difficulties, of course, the province feels it. There is huge impact. This is and the object of this whole wonderful Congress, the card industry, for instance. Córdoba is a very important has, as a matter of fact, the Brazilian market as one of the main destinations for our car and engine exports. That's where our car industry and car parts go, agricultural machinery as well. And of course, in the food industry, we must say that we also export a lot to Brazil. Argentina is to Brazil a very important market for its products. Of course, it's right now in decline due to the strong recession that we are undergoing, but for Córdoba, it is a key aspect, the idea to have a development for the MERCOSUR. And let me add that apart from Córdoba, I have to say that the central region, Córdoba together with Entre Ríos and Santa Fe, we form the central region, and we all three provinces work together in order to enhance the region, and for this region it's key to have the MERCOSUR development. Thank you, very clear. Mr. Ambassador, let's profit from this event. Together with President Bolsonaro's visit, it has been really important, at least the impact that this visit has had. We'd like some sort of analysis on what is the projection that you see in this relationship. Sure. First, I'd like to greet all of my friends, all of the entrepreneurs that are here, exporters, everyone in the wheat production chain. For me, is with great satisfaction that I share this moment with you. I remember when I was appointed ambassador, I had a meeting with Minister Sergio Busso and Minister Avalle to plan on what was the right move for the wheat industry to take. And when we started with this idea, that's where this idea came up. The idea of having TrigAR here came up, and I'd like to congratulate you because you made it possible. You made it happen. Sometimes we wonder in this context, why do we question ourselves so much about this integration process in MERCOSUR? The process is neither good nor bad. It's what we do of it. So over the last 2-3 years, we've made it more useful. We've tried to increase exports. The private sector has a key role in all this because this is something that you know really well. Public officers have limitations. The limitations of the quality of the purchaser, the technical limitations. Gustavo worked a lot on the technical norms to smooth the regulations between the two countries. So within that context, this is like the ones we had yesterday, and the meetings between the presidents is really important. And our toughest job is to set the stage so that presidents build these trust scenarios, so that they believe in each other, and so that their teams can implement the decisions that they make. So the idea and the decision is that the dynamic of MERCOSUR is a platform with a projection for Argentine and Brazilian products, Brazil, Paraguay. So if something happened in the previous administrations, a very populist experience in both countries, for Brazil, for our products, it looked like impossible to go in. So we are going to be, in 20 months, MERCOSUR will turn 30 years old, and I think in that integration lifespan, you can divide it in 2 cycles. I would even include the 5 preparation years that start with the Iguazu Declaration, the signing of Sarney and Alfonsín. That was the bilateral integration aspect. So if you take all that time, there were 2 clear cycles from 85 to 2002, about 2002, where trade is dynamic, it grows exponentially. Both Argentine and Brazilian economies are integrated to the world. with economic stabilization programs. And in that program, in that process, our two countries are quite balanced, with a surplus of $12 million in favor of Argentina. But if you prorate it in 15 years of time, it's insignificant. But in 2002, 2003, both countries started an experience that I defined as populist, and I stand by my definition. And we accumulated $53,000 million in deficit. So that is the fiscal deficit that Brazil has in the year, $53,000 million in deficit. Of course, that is not convenient for us. That's what we cannot allow for it to happen. And that's what we've been trying to change over the last 3 years. This entrepreneurial push from Argentinian entrepreneurs, combined with the support of the public sector, we were able to remove barriers and to go again into the Brazilian market. We still have a long way to go, but I'd like to finish and conclude my first participation. MERCOSUR and the integration will be whatever we make of it. And we will continue investing in this direction, because that is what's going to allow us to have better opportunities for our productive sectors. Thank you very much.
Gustavo, aprovecho para consultarte. Hoy cuando nos levantamos, los diarios tomaban en sus titulares un tema que a mi entender fue bastante inesperado de la visita del presidente Bolsonaro, que es la creación de la moneda común, este denominado peso real. ¿Qué
Peso real. Which are the expectations of what do you think of having this common currency? I think the idea is quite interesting, but right now it's not the right time, and it is right now unlikely, considering the context, to have a common currency. I don't know what the name might be. Being a little ironic, I think it would be just mixing Malbec and Caipirinha. I mean, what you get out of that is impossible to drink. And to have a common currency would need to have a sort of a federal bank. And our central bank in Argentina lacks some. It was funded in 1935 with the different, expectations that would have a president for 6 years. And the first one that actually complied with that term, Mr. Bosch, was he could only actually comply with that term. But in Brazil, it's quite different, because there's a specific committee to take care of that, to set the goals of the exchange rates, that together with the central bank sets the baseline interest rate. So it is complicated. It is difficult to get or even imagine that situation of having a common currency, because, dollar is, or everything is pegged to dollars. So through this, we can see that both currencies are weak. Peso devalued 118%, and real devalued 15.7%. So it is difficult to imagine a common currency where, if I take, for example, 17 years ago, October 2002, the nominal value of real was $3, almost $3, and 17 years 3 years later is 3.7 reals. So if in Argentina, for example, a dollar is equivalent to 46 pesos, and 17 years later, then the dollar is 43 pesos. I think that most exporters would be, contacting the government because it would be possible to export under those circumstances. So I think that the cultural vision, even the dollar in Argentina and dollar in Brazil, is different when we are born here, we are told that is our father, and that you see that bill is $1, and that's going to be with you for the rest of your life, even when your parents are no longer alive. And Brazilians don't think this way. When Brazilians see the news, they watch the news, dollar, blue, and all the kinds of dollars, country risk. I mean, they just wonder. This is cultural. So I think it's a good idea to work, in the future. But I think there are other priorities, such as tax regulations and so on, that require more attention. About this regulatory convergence and trade, and what you were saying, that it's important to have a solid MERCOSUR so that Argentina can grow. How do you see the participation of the business sector in terms of this integration process? Well, Córdoba has always been interested very much in MERCOSUR, and business chambers and several times have requested greater participation to the federal government. That is to actually grow the MERCOSUR relationship. So I think the business sector in Córdoba is really involved in it, and oftentimes these things were not achieved. But today, this is improving. The Ministry of Production, the National Ministry of Production, has different programs in place, and through these programs they get the different needs that the business sectors have. And I think we have to work more in that sense, in that direction. And I think that by supporting this process, and particularly what concerns us at TrigAR, I think we have to look into a line of research and investigation that actually contributes to exports, and not only to consider the supply of primary goods. We have to find new ways to improve seeds and develop new industrialized or processed products. I think this is a key issue. We have the ways to do this in Argentina. We have the human resources to do this. Córdoba has 14 universities and 250,000 students, and most of them come to Córdoba from neighboring countries, even Brazil. So we do have this research and development or innovative, but we have the human resources that could actually contribute to MERCOSUR dynamics. Mr. Ambassador, yesterday we were discussing with Arbitrigo. We're discussing something that you're involved in, which is the concept of regulatory convergence. We have the need to have we need to have a specific harmonization and regulations in terms of food safety, for example, and we understand that the national government is promoting this discussion. How do you see, what is the possibility for Argentina and Brazil to lead the process and achieve short-term results in the short term? I think that this will happen as long as presidents are focused on removing different restrictions in terms of food safety. And Macri has been really consistent. And the first official visit to Brazil he discussed with the Brazilian government different options that have been evaluated. I think that the regulatory issue is really difficult. It seems that it's really difficult to remove, but I don't like comparing it with with other sectors that are more complex. For example, the development of nuclear energy and the different international restrictions to develop, technological issues in that in the nuclear energy area. In this sense, they created a common committee or agency to control these regulation, and that was created at the time MERCOSUR was created. And this agency issues the regulations for both countries. So they do this jointly together with the International Agency for Atomic Energy, for Nuclear Energy. And this has become the agency to actually monitor all of the regulations between both countries. And this can be seen, for example, between India and Pakistan, or in the Arab Gulf. So the progress in that direction has been really robust, but this did not happen in terms of regulation. We discussed a lot with Mr. Fouquet in trying to identify, different restrictions, and we have been able to remove a lot of restrictions. Last week, in fact, Javier was telling me that at last we have been able to remove restrictions, for example, in the sector of shrimps, and because we cannot export shrimps to Brazil despite their deficit in Brazil. But I'm just taking this example because the shrimps, because when tariffs decrease and when competition starts, the stress in either sector, the first thing we have are restrictions and tariffs. During the election campaigns, this was a very important issue on the media. So they even questioned the political influence on the different agencies in charge of regulations. From my perspective, representing Argentina and Brazil, I'm not going to criticize Brazilian choices and decisions. We also have issues in Argentina, but I think here there's room for improvement, making improvement, or making some progress. Just by looking at other European examples, there is willingness to work in this direction, and again, I think we need to make a big effort to see, concrete results. And I would also like to talk a little about the news. I just heard last night about common currency, and I'll resort back to putting this thing in perspective. Some of you know who I am, but I worked in the drafting the Constitution for MERCOSUR, and I remember well that the development of a common currency was in that treaty back in 1991 and 1994, and until 1998, the presidents of the federal banks and the ministries of economies met on a regular basis to discuss convergence, macroeconomic convergence issues. Why did this topic leave the agenda? Because we had some financial and monetary issues, stressing issues since 1995 with the Mexican crisis, that in 90 cent with the Thai baht and the Russian, the devaluation. In that context, with a lot of cooperation, Brazil, surprisingly enough, allowed for the devaluation of the Brazilian real. That changed the sort of the program to build trust between countries. And this doesn't mean that in the short term we cannot achieve good results. I believe that this willingness or proposal by the Brazilian government to develop a macroeconomic framework is really positive and constructive. Of course, I mean, this doesn't mean we to come up with a name for the currency. Probably we can have a context here in the audience. But this is a long process. It involves a lot of technical work. Important thing here is we should recognize that macroeconomic convergence is a critical issue for markets to integrate in the long term. It's a realistic perspective, and we need to consider that the process itself wants to make progress, wants to move forward. We have just a few more minutes, so you could probably make some final remarks looking ahead. Gustavo, how do you see the future of MERCOSUR, Argentina and Brazil? When Bolsonaro was elected, I was quite skeptical about it, or fearful, because this impacted on the MERCOSUR. For example, if the MERCOSUR is just the four of us, Mr. Ambassador wants to, I mean, we should all move as a group, right? And somehow it is a way to protect, in this case, the MERCOSUR industry from export outside of the bloc. So then this gives a possibility to a lack of competitive that we have in Argentina, adding to the fact of the restrictions and the taxes to exports. So the proposal of Brazil, I have the feeling that its flexibilization of MERCOSUR is irreversible, and it is a way. I mean, it is good because we have to improve competitiveness. Now, if they remove restrictions and protections, then I have to, improve. I think that when we see today, even in a context that is quite weak, we see, the possibility of having a macroeconomic convergence and a common currency. So I think that this, this idea not being interested in MERCOSUR, I think it wasn't really state policy. And I expect that in the short term or medium term, we need to have, a common policy. So this can be people that can actually, be in. No matter what the administration, they can continue in their terms and their. And Ministry, how do you see the future and the role of Córdoba? I think Córdoba, as part of Argentina, I think that the key objective to achieve should be a stronger MERCOSUR. Why? Because I think this is to our own defense, the member countries of MERCOSUR, the need to strengthen our common market. Basically, considering that for the developed world is in a sort of in a trade wars between China and the United States and Mexico. So based on this, the growth and strengthening of MERCOSUR will be to our own defense, the defense of our own interests, specifically the member countries of MERCOSUR. This is a way to consolidate ourselves and to sort of fight for better conditions that that could result from these trade wars. Mr. Ambassador, what's your view for the future? I think we have to stand up for the achievements the changes we've been able to achieve over the last few years with Macri's administration. And Argentine wheat accounts for 12% of the total exports to Brazil, Argentina to Brazil. It's the second export product behind cars and parts. I'm proud to discuss this in Córdoba because Córdoba is a key province in that integration process. Because here, not only wheat is produced, but also other products that are exported to Brazil. That's why working hard and we have to deepen into the process of change and transformation of Argentina and the integration with Brazil, so that MERCOSUR, instead of being a ceiling, becomes actually a platform that would allow us to have access to world markets. Okay, so it is clear that we all agree that MERCOSUR and the consolidation of MERCOSUR means welfare for all of the member countries and the citizens of those member countries. A warm round of applause to all of the members of the panel.